And let's now begin this newscast with the latest border dispute between Nepal and India. The Nepal Parliament has unanimously approved the country's new map. The controversial map shows Indian territories as part of Nepal. The KP Sharma Oli-led government had already approved this map. The map issue has led to a diplomatic row between New Delhi and Kathmandu. It shows India's Lipulekh, Kalapani and Limpiyadhura as part of the Himalayan nation. It seems that Prime Minister Oli has let self-preservation trump national interest. According to sources, India had offered a dialogue to Nepal over the territory row. The offer was made 1 week before Nepal's foreign minister stated that India has been snubbing Nepal's requests for talks on the border issue.
We have expressed time and again that Nepal wants to sit at the table to settle all these problems. We were a bit surprised by the silence from Indian side when we sent November and December last year. Still we are waiting for the formal negotiation so that these two countries with big civilization, with very close connection, with a very unique type of partnership, they can develop more inspiring relation which reflects the requirements of the 21st century.
Now, this boundary dispute comes at a very fragile point of time for India. For more details and perspective, let's quickly go across to Mr. Harsh V. Pant, who is the head of Observer Research Foundation Strategic Studies Program. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Pant, for eking out your precious time. Let me begin by asking, apart from the issue of Nepal's new map, be it the recent firing at the border in Bihar or Prime Minister Oli's remarks labelling coronavirus as an Indian virus, what do you make of the current boundary dispute between India and Nepal, which have so far shared open borders, unlike with Pakistan and China?
Well, it's quite extraordinary, I'm afraid. I mean, I find this quite strange because if the intent is to resolve this problem, and this problem is not of recent vintage, this is historical, this goes back decades. So clearly, if the intent of Kathmandu was to resolve this, then Mr. Oli has certainly found a very unique way of resolving it by calling India names, by ratcheting up pressure, by suddenly changing the boundary, by suddenly changing the maps. So I find it very difficult to believe that there is that the Nepalese side or this government in particular wants to resolve this. It seems, I think broadly, that this is more about self-preservation for Mr. Oli, and anti-India sentiment sells very well in Nepal if you want to consolidate your domestic political position, and that seems to be what Mr. Oli has done. And unfortunately, that might be not the best way to take India-Nepal relations forward.
Yeah, consolidating the domestic position is something that I'm going to just come to, Mr. Pant, a very interesting point that you've made. Given that Prime Minister Oli has ignored the offer of diplomatic dialogue, this is information that has been confirmed by government sources in a news report today. Yet Prime Minister Oli has gone ahead with amending the constitution forward. What do you make of Nepal's approach at the moment?
Very strange and very, I think, dangerous for the relationship between two nations, which, as in your report, the Foreign Minister of Nepal was saying, it's a unique relationship. No two countries in the world share the kind of relationship that India and Nepal share. And I think it would be very foolhardy for any government in Kathmandu to think that by ratcheting up pressure like this, they can move or make progress on this very, very contentious issue, which has been lying on the agenda for so long. So clearly, I think somewhere down the line, something else is happening in Nepal, and India, for various reasons, India, one can blame India at times for not taking Nepal very seriously. But I don't think that Mr. Modi and his government has not taken Nepal seriously. If you think how twice he has visited Nepal, and both of these visits, he has been very successful in conveying a sense of urgency that India-Nepal relations need to move forward with and to resolve their disputes. But I think what the domestic political imperatives seem to be trumping at the moment any serious consideration for the resolution of this dispute.
All right. Now, when it comes to the dispute, Mr. Pant, do you agree that the heart of the dispute lies in differing cartographic interpretations about the headwaters of the Mahakaliya boundary river between the two neighbors?
It does indeed, and I think whenever you have differences like this, like the boundary issue, where we know that it is not very easy to resolve, and we know that on both sides there have been problems. At times, India has given dates and times, and India has indicated that it's willing to move forward, and Nepal has not been prepared. At times, Nepal has given certain indications that it is willing to move forward, and India has not been prepared. But I think largely, what Mr. Oli seems to have done is taken that particular cartographic point and expanded it. Now you have territories that have never been in contention,
right.
which have been brought into contention, which is I don't think is a very sensible way of resolving a historical dispute, which had a particular point, as you mentioned, at Mahakali, the Kalapani dispute, which was always in contention, and on which number of negotiations, number of rounds have happened.
Absolutely. Now, let's also look at the other factors which are complicating the issue. Do you agree with Army Chief General Naravane's comments when he said that Nepal's move comes at the behest of China?
Well, I don't know whether China is playing a role in this, but certainly China's role under the Oli government has expanded tremendously. We also know that in early May, there was factionalism within the ruling coalition, and the ruling coalition was about to fall apart. And Chinese ambassador in Kathmandu played a very important role in patching up the differences and making sure Mr. Oli continues as the prime minister. So I don't think China's role is now hidden. The kind of role China is playing in shaping Nepalese domestic politics is hidden anymore. The issue for Nepal is, can Nepal think that China will pull its chestnuts out of the fire every time there is a problem with India? India relationship remains unique. The kind of societal interactions that India and Nepal share, India and China don't share. Mr. Oli may have benefactors in Beijing, but certainly that's not the impression that you get from the larger societal links that India and Nepal share. So clearly there is, if Mr. Oli feels that that is going to save him or save his position in Nepal in the long term, I think that's a very dangerous assumption to make.
All right, fair enough. Is Nepal's Prime Minister now using this issue to deflect criticism for his government's handling of the pandemic, as well as consolidate his beleaguered position within his party, something you had mentioned just now?
Absolutely. I mean, there is no other way to look at the kind of comments he has made, the way he has ratcheted up pressure, the way he has spawned India, the way he, despite India's outreach. And I think, there can be genuine differences, and there are genuine differences between India and Nepal. But a sensible government in Delhi and a sensible government in Kathmandu would like to resolve them amicably, not by making comments like Indian virus is dangerous than Chinese virus, or that India is not serious about it, or that we will take every inch of the disputed territory. So I think there are comments that have been made. The rhetoric has been very undiplomatic, and steps that Mr. Oli has taken seem to suggest that he is more bothered about his domestic political positioning, where anti-India sentiment has been a very important factor in making him what he is today.
Absolutely. Mr. Pant, an amicable settlement is what is now the need of the hour. What's the way forward to solve this row?
I think both sides, and in particular, I think at this point in time, it's for Nepal to decide how it wants to proceed with India. Many in India would be looking at this and saying, you had mentioned the point about China. Now, China and Nepal may not be working together at this point, but if you are an ordinary Indian sitting here, in any part of India today, and you look at the kind of problems that are happening, the kind of statements that are coming, even certain, some local firing that has happened in the border areas, you would contend that maybe Nepal is coordinating its actions with China. Now, certainly that's not an impression that Nepal wants to convey to Indian friends. Nepal has a lot of Indian friends. Nepal has a lot of political capital in India, and certainly that's not the best way to use it. So clearly, I think Mr. Oli and his government needs to lower down the temperature, and India needs to convey that it is willing to move forward on any disputed issue. But Mr. Oli cannot simply create new issues on the ground. You cannot create new cartographic issues and say India now needs to talk to us on these issues. No, that will not happen, and that will only lead to hardening of positions on both sides. So both sides need to make overtures which can lower the temperature down at the moment, and then move forward gradually on the central issue, which is the Kalapani issue.
Absolutely, and considering India and Bangladesh have also managed to resolve their border dispute earlier, it's not something that India cannot manage with its neighbours. Let's leave it at that at this moment. Thank you so much, Mr. Pant, for joining us.